Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's discussion board. This week's connecting conversation is with Tasia, who is one of the founders of Merrill Safe Haven, which is a nonprofit located right in Worcester, where I think most of you guys are. So thanks for joining me, Tasia. I really appreciate your time and you talking to the students a bit about your experiences. Can you just give us a little background on who you are and what Merrill Safe Haven is?
Yeah, absolutely. So as Stephanie said, Tasia Cerezo, I have a background in education. So I have a doctorate in higher education leadership as well. And I've been in and out of the nonprofit sector. Of course, education is also part of the nonprofit sector, but in different ways of services, providing as a teen center director, et cetera. So I started Merrill Safe Haven as an organization with my spouse. And as an organization, what we're looking to do is provide shelter to families and young people who have aged out of DCF. The starting place of Merrill Safe Haven, came from me wanting to do something to honor my aunt's legacy, who passed last year. And she had always wanted to provide shelter to young people who are aging out of DCF. And so as a foster parent, that was our starting place as an organization, but also we recognized the need and the gap of housing across the country. And so we wanted to be a valuable option to folks who land in the city of Worcester.
Great, thank you. And so I guess one of my first, just a point of clarification for anybody who's not in this field, DCF, Department of Children and Families. So just to clarify jargon. And then my next question, because a few weeks ago, our students learned about how to file nonprofit status, what the importance of that is, how that opens doors for you. And since you did that relatively recently, can you tell us a little bit about your experience with that process? Did you use a lawyer? Did you do it yourself? How awful was it? You know, what can be expected?
So it's funny you say, did I use a lawyer? Because most people don't tend to use an outside resource. Even as someone who teaches a nonprofit and management course, I hired an organization to do the legwork for us to start our nonprofit. So I provided all of the information as far as the mission statement, the board members, our budget, and all those items, and we had someone to file the paperwork for us. And the biggest challenge, I think, for us as an organization was more so being recognized as a charity organization in the state of Massachusetts, because you hit the wrong button and you're waiting 2 weeks, 3 weeks for a response. But the overall gathering of information, because obviously you're so close to the ground as someone starting a nonprofit, it is kind of an easy process when you're able to collect the information or develop the information and hand it over to someone else. So it's a headache as you're waiting to get information back or ensuring that no one else has questions about the information that you're providing. But the process itself for us was a bit easy, knowing that it could have taken a long time. It took us a month, because again, we didn't have to do the legwork ourselves. We just had to gather the materials and then hand it over to someone else.
So from when you decided to go for nonprofit status to when it was awarded, that was a month?
That was a month.
Wow,
yeah.
that's
it
really
was
good.
Yeah, most people are like, well, it could be 3 to 6 months, and I was like, that's gonna hurt to wait that long when we're ready to go right now. And surprisingly so, I was working on something one day and suddenly I had an email. And I was like, well, I thought this needed to come in the mail. And it's like, oh, you'll get something in the mail as well, basically. And so it was quicker than I thought, I should say. And I was able to inform my board members, and we're like, all right, what are the next steps? So we were able to jump immediately into, all right, here we are, we're an organization. What needs to happen next? Charity registration. Okay, now that you're a charity, what else do you need to do? You need to be able to solicit funds. And so we were able to kind of trek along in a pretty seamless way, I would say, because of awareness, but also because we had some support at the beginning that allowed us to just move on to the next phases.
Yeah, and I think that's important to note. It's not just, did you get your 501c3 status? Oh, now I can apply for all these funding. There are more steps afterwards, and sometimes you don't know until you start an application and you get asked for something you've never heard of before.
Right. Right.
You know I've got a very secure system taped right behind me of like, what is our EIN number? What are my logins to these things? Because
Mhm.
they're just so constantly asked. And an EIN is basically like your organization's social security number. You need it for everything, and it's how folks check your qualifications. So that's helpful. Thank you. And that was how long ago? Within the past year or two, I imagine.
Yep. That was January. So I actually submitted the document over late December, but because we wanted to stay within the calendar year of things when it came down to reporting, both mostly fiscal, we wanted to make sure that when we hit submit, it was for January 1st. So everything would happen within the 2023 kind of fiscal window, and we weren't, oh, this report has to be submitted at the end of the year, and this one has to be submitted at the beginning of the year. So we wanted to keep everything within the calendar year. So it was really fast.
Yeah, that's smart too. The calendar year and fiscal year reporting, most larger grants will just have an annual report, but some of the smaller ones have quarterly ones. And so to
Right.
time things right from the get-go with that, it is really helpful because especially for a smaller organization, which obviously mine is too, it is a lot of reports by a lot of different people all at once, and it's helpful to line things up. I know we're recording this now in August 2023. September, I have my first external audit. October, I have an executive office of the Department of Veterans Services audit, and then the audits just keep coming till the end of the year. So it helps to have things lined up on quarters.
Absolutely. And especially where some of those reports, as you kind of alluded to, some of them are asking for the same information. It's just, you got to write it differently, or you submit it to a different place. In my other work that isn't Merrill Safe Haven, my program is being audited as well. And so it's the pieces of not just fiscal, but like, are you actually doing what you're supposed to do, in the sense of like the contracting, or if you have subcontractors, are they also being responsive? And so there's so many layers to that. Keeping as much together as possible really makes a difference, especially for a CEO that might be on the ground doing some of this work, or if you're not hired to complete capacity, being able to line all these items up to ensure that they're practically seamless, it makes a difference.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so now that you've established, you've got all that paperwork done, what did you decide to do first? Did you go for federal funding, grants, private foundations? How did you decide what external funding to pursue first?
As a new nonprofit, you don't really decide. You go for anything that fits into your vision and your mission, right? I think one of the hardest things to do, especially in the nonprofit sector, is to avoid mission drift, because it's, oh, look at that will work well in the sense of dollars. And so I think sometimes organizations are so happy that there's an opportunity to apply for resources that they jump into any opportunity. And so I would say for us, it's read the grants or the opportunity and made sense of it first. How does it actually fit into what we're planning to do? Because of course, also kind of what we talk about with audits, with any resources you receive, there's typically a report due, and you got to make sense, were we actually able to do that, / are we going to be able to do that? Because that will be an expectation. And so I would say, kind of going back and answering your question, the first thing we did was apply for state funds. So COMBIS, which is one of those opportunities at Massachusetts level, being able to put in a quote for a bid that's posted. We started there. We know that there's a need in the state. And so going for something that would that already has a solid foundation in the sense of how they provide support, the expectations of funds, how much money you can use for kind of the overhead versus programming. We wanted to start with something that was already established. And so we went with state dollars first. And then from there, we focused on more philanthropy with kind of just the general solicitation of funds, but also applying for foundational funds from organizations that, again, aligned with our mission and vision. And so that's kind of the space that we have been in. Organizations, foundations that make a true connection to the work that we want to do, versus kind of grasping at straws of like, oh, here's another opportunity, because they're also very time consuming.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's so 2 points there that I definitely want to highlight. One is for anybody working at the state level or looking for state funds, Combis is a great website, but it's an overwhelming website. I get
Absolutely.
deep in the rabbit hole of it because they're posting for like plumbers for state jobs, road construction, environmental concerns, housing. It is worth your while to just spend 20-30 minutes clicking around that site to get used to it. Because then you also have to get used to the language they're using on there. And the way my brain works is the first time I read something, I think, ugh, no, I'm too overwhelmed by it to keep going. And then I'll digest it, and the next day I'll go back and it'll make perfect sense. So giving yourself that space to explore those websites is really helpful.
Especially the ones that provide filtering opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
There's some Combi does not provide great filtering opportunity.
No, it's just all there.
yeah. And so it's like, you also, when you're talking about that particular site, is like, what am I actually looking for? And it may be like you're operating or looking to operate in a particular town. It's like just being able to narrow in on something really makes a difference when you're in a site, especially like Combi.
Yeah. And then I think the other point that you made that I expect will be a theme as I do all of these videos is being selective about what you apply for, so that you don't have to do 25 things you don't want to do to have the money for the one thing you were actually looking for. Because when you first get started as a nonprofit, and honestly, even now, my organization's been open for 40 years, it's really tempting to just say, like, I just want more money to do things, but that's not the way to do it and be successful, or to have happy staff if you're making them do 18 new things to get the one thing you wanted. So can you talk a little bit more about, as you're looking at funding opportunities, how you decide what is worth it to take on, in addition to what you're doing, and what's an immediate no for you, things like that?
That's a loaded question.
It's a tough question. Yeah.
It's a tough question.
It's personal for every organization.
Yeah. So I think, again, because we're such a new organization, it's really easy to not go into mission drift, because our capacity. I think that's the place, like, to answer your question, it's focused on capacity. If we don't currently have the staff, and we really don't have staff, right, to do that work, and if it's questionable, it's not worth our time or energy. Because what we're saying that we do as an organization that provides holistic support, which is a part of our mission, is that we are committing to provide a number of things to one particular family if these are the things that they need. And being able to duplicate those efforts makes a difference for an organization that's new and small. And so the things that we know that provide the support that our population needs are the things that we're willing and able to focus on for any particular grant opportunity. If we're already doing it, yes, we need more money to do that. And that's kind of how I jump into a grant. Are you asking us, can we or do we provide support in the way of navigating workforce development? Yes, we're already doing that. This is worth our time and our effort. We don't have to go and do additional research. We don't have to go and find new staff to do it. We don't have to hire a consultant. And so those are the things that are easy to focus on. And that's an absolute yes. Again, if you have to do 10 things to get one, it's not worth your time, as you already alluded to, unless there's an opportunity for some planning funds. And that is sometimes helpful when I think about my other position, when we're able to provide planning funds because the program is shifting a little bit. That is your opportunity, or our opportunity, I should say, to say, okay, this won't be that heavy of a lift. They just want to know if you can do it. Is it a possibility for an organization to get this work done? Does it fit into your mission? And those are the things that are worth moving forward with, not the things that are completely, we need to have data that says you're going to do this and it's absolutely possible and we're going to figure out how to get other organizations to do it, I think it becomes a difficult challenge, and it becomes a bit burdensome to your organization as well.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, we've been having these conversations on site with my staff and my board a lot lately because there's such a desperate need for housing in the state. And even my staff now is saying, like, you need to go for grants for emergency shelters. You need to go for grants for housing. Yes, somebody does, but I don't out of room. I have 6 buildings. They're all full. So if I get this grant, who's going to buy me a building to put it in, right? So even though it fits the mission, it's what we do. We provide housing to homeless individuals here. The grants don't usually have capital funds attached, right? So it is also even going further than, does this connect with the mission, but also what else is it going to cost me? Because generally when I get asked, can you expand and take on more beds? I say, sure. Do you have $500,000? Because I need to buy a house and renovate it, and then get the case managers for it. It's a lot, and it's always more complicated. But you see the shiny thing, the grant for $1 million, and then when you get into it, you realize, I can't actually do the work that this says yet. I got to find another grant at a lower level to get there. So that's kind of what I wanted to lead into. I think you recently secured some money that'll help you get a space, and you recently found a space. If that worked out, can you talk a little bit about moving from, okay, we're established, we have a board, we found some money. How do you move that to physical locations and doing the work, and where are you at in that process?
So yeah, we've done all of those things in the sense of steps. I can't say at this point that we have received any documentation related to funds. We have all the ones that we've applied to are still pending. And it's not really uncommon, because I say all the ones that we applied to, like most of them happened in June, and then one was like July. And so it is only the end of August. And again, not uncommon once they get the committee together, review applications, et cetera, et cetera. But in that process of getting started and talking to DHCD or state programs and other nonprofits about their process, and understanding how do we go from kind of what you said, like the startup organization, to being ready to go. We were able to make a lot of connections and build our network to figure out what might be missing or what can we do in the meantime. In that process, although we didn't receive funds yet to buy our own property, we met some property owners in the city of Worcester who is happy to work in partnership with us. And so as a part of our startup conversations, even with the city, we're trying to identify abandoned buildings that we might be able to take over and make it something that will be great for the community to continue the revitalization. And we kind of hit a wall with some of those discussions. And so being able to connect with people who have been in Worcester for most of their lives, who have property that has housed in some ways similar populations, and understand the work that we're doing and are willing to work with us, that has been the biggest blessing in disguise, because we haven't received the funds. We are an established organization, and they are willing to wait for us until we have everything we need in place. And so that has really put some fire under us, actually, additionally, to say, okay, we haven't heard back. Let's contact the governor's office. We haven't heard back. Let's go to the city. We haven't heard back. Is there anyone in the city who might also be able to provide support? Are there other nonprofit organizations that we might be able to even become a subcontractor to, so that we can begin our own relationships? But also, now whoever is looking at us for the possibility of funds, have an understanding that we're an organization that aren't just sitting around, but we're looking to build out our network and to get started in ways that are feasible to still provide support to the population and continue to build relationships within the city, so we also just don't appear to be siloed.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly what I was getting at when I said, like that those are the steps before the steps, right? Now when you go for grants, you can say we have this relationships, we have this landlord, we've identified this property. We can go now, which is most of what the grants you apply for are looking for. Almost all of them will ask, when is your implementation date? When do you start? And to be able to say immediately puts you right at that top of the list. I know
Absolutely.
just yesterday I found out, thankfully, that two of our largest federal contracts were renewed. And I think it's in part because we have them, like we're ready to go. And so when we're competing with other people for these grants, we can say we have the building, we have the staff, we've been doing it, we can start the day the money arrives. That makes a big difference.
Absolutely.
And one of the grants that we just got, or contracts more so than a grant with the federal government, it is only the second time it's gone out to bid. So we weren't sure because
Right.
it's only existed for now, it'll go into the fourth year. There were some great aspects of it. There were some not great aspects. We found out 50% of the people who already had the grant didn't get it. So we've been sitting thinking, well, if we didn't get the no, maybe the
Maybe the yes will come sometime.
but the ability to say we have this contract, it works well with these other contracts, and we can go now is helpful. So I guess that'll kind of lead me into my next question for you, or just kind of conversation topic, is the importance of all of these relationship building aspects, because the grant writing and the fundraising doesn't exist without the person that you can pick up the phone and call to talk to about it. So can you talk to me a little bit about how you've started making those relationships, spreading the word, making sure people know who you are, those kind of things?
Well, it's kind of like telemarketing, I feel like.
Yeah.
It's a lot of cold calls. You're praying either someone will answer the phone or respond to your email. Because if you're making a transition like me, my other full-time position is workforce development, right? Still connected to the state and nonprofit, but it is not in the sector of human services, right? It's not shelter work. So people will see my name and not recognize me as someone who has been in this area and who's like, okay, like, let me call this old friend. It is completely, hey, you're doing this work. I'm breaking into this work. Would you like to talk to me? Do you have the time? And so when you get someone to respond, you feel like, all right, this is my lucky day in some ways. And that's a kind of a tedious process, but it's definitely one worth doing, because those are the folks, when something does come out, even in Combine, right? A state opportunity where they're looking for multiple organizations to come into a grant, those are the people you call, because now you've established a level of respect with that organization. They have an idea of who you are, what you do, and what you stand by. And so they're willing to work with you. They're willing to go in partnership with you. And for an organization that has been around, 30 plus years, you need that kind of opportunity to follow in some ways behind them and be taken under their wing to say, we can provide support and we vouch for your organization, right? Which is a major difference when you're new and no one knows who you are, or if you're going to be successful. And so it's, again, tedious work, but always worth doing, because you always need someone, especially as someone established, to be able to vouch for you.
Yeah, I agree. We, in the first 3 weeks of this class, are hammering in, like, it's hard to ask for money, do it anyway. It's very hard to ask for money, still keep trying. It's, again, going to continue to be hard for asking for money, right? And so now at this point in the class, we're talking a little bit more about, okay, so you've asked for the money, what do you do next? And I think that's a part of it. It is easier to ask for money when you have people who will vouch for you, who will say, right, yes, I know that person, and you can trust them. And that's just kind of on the business level, but on the human services level, it's also good to be able to say to a client of yours, I'm referring you to this organization. I know them. I trust them. You can call them. So that kind of level of relationship building works not just for fiscal oversight and backing, but also, when you're working with the population that is scared, underrepresented, doesn't know how to navigate things, so that you don't just have to say, I can't help you, sorry. You can say, I can't help you, but I know someone who might. I trust them. Let's call them together. And we've done that a few times already, and it's important. So, some of it feels like just kind of that gross hustling for money, but the positive side of it is now you have a dozen other nonprofits that you can call when somebody needs help, and one of them might be able to help if you can't. So as much as it is difficult to ask for money, know that the other side of it is saying, now I can call people, especially when you're applying for money for private and local foundations, and
Yeah.
they love when you come back to them and ask for help. We've got a small grant of, I think they give us about $15,000 a year for like enrichment and reintegration programming. But sometimes I'll call them and say, hey, we have a client. We don't really do what they need us. Did anybody else you give a grant to this year do it? And they love that because it shows engagement. So all that's, I think, great. Okay,
I
so
would agree with that for sure. I would also add, as you said, asking for money is hard. And so I remember even being in my doctorate program, and we were supposed to practice like being able to, just our classmate, someone sitting next to me, supposed to practice asking for money, and I could not do it. And so now sitting in the seat, that feels ridiculous because I don't even know this person I'm calling or writing a note to, and it feels like I don't really have a choice. I could laugh about it in class, but it's not really a joking matter as the CEO of an organization. It was like, yeah, no. And my board says you need to do that, and it's like I don't really have much of a choice. It is difficult for sure, but it is necessary to keep your organization afloat.
It is, and even at the simplest levels, it's still difficult. So we have an annual fundraiser every year, and we just had it this past weekend. So it's my third time running the fundraiser. It is my first time putting a donation jar on the table because I didn't want to.
Why me?
Like I got the sponsors. We brought in the money, and it's largely supported by sponsors. So I didn't want to ask attendees to also donate to it. But like, if you don't ask, nobody's going to offer. And so, you have to do it, and you get more and more used to it as it goes. So I guess to wrap up a little bit here, we've got another like 5 or 7 minutes. Can you talk to me about, what you would recommend for somebody else just getting started in the field? What do you think was the best place for you to start, and what do you see maybe needing to do in year 2 that you didn't get to or won't get to in year 1?
I think the best place to start is a place I never thought I would say, actually, having something of a strategic and possible marketing plan in place. And marketing could be by way of fundraising, right? How do you get the word out while also being able to ask for money? I think they come hand in hand. I think that there are opportunities that arise with even grant writing and opportunities that are saying, hey, we need additional resources, that if you have a business plan in place, you get to take things and drop them in. And so having something like that prepared when you're ready to do the heavy lifting, it really does make a difference, especially for an organization that's just getting started, and depending on your size, right? For me, is one other person that can be on the ground full time, but that's not actually what's happening. It's really me after another full-time position and other life things, right? Trying to prepare to make a request for some dollars, and you want to still put your best foot forward, but you're exhausted at the end of the day, right? And so it's really hard to ignore that there are just some pretty basic things that you need to be prepared to talk about. I think one of the things that I'm happy that I do right now is I try to post a blog at least once a month on our website. And so although people might not be donating, I'm talking about the process. And so if there's someone who is interested in learning more about like, what are the challenges of starting a nonprofit? What did you forget along the way? We're trying to document that while also recognizing there's a lot that goes into this process overall of depending on your mission, your vision, why you got started. Someone has to be able to tell that story. And if you're not making it on the front page, or if you're not going to be on the local news, you still have to be able to articulate it in a way that someone would say, that's a cause worth donating to. And I recognize that face. It doesn't matter if you are directly impacted by that thing in which your organization is built around. if you are the CEO, if you're the executive director, you are the face of the organization. And so being prepared with some talking points with how you want to get some marketing done, how you want to spread the word at the start of things before it becomes kind of overwhelming, I think is really helpful for any organization. And I was able to do that. I was also spotlighted for my doctorate program. And so when that was released, I was like, all right, releasing the website. And so it was an opportunity to continue to build on our other opportunities. So people knew who we were and what we were doing, although we weren't even at that point just completely ready to go. If someone said, when is your start date? As you said before, I can say, would you like to go over to the space right now? And so that makes a difference in just being prepared with some materials to talk about what you're doing, how you're doing it, and then what are your gaps? Understanding your weaknesses as an organization, especially as you're getting started, is as important as understanding your strengths, because you're going to have someone to say, how can we provide support? And you need to be able to respond to that, because that might be your next great opportunity to fill that gap. And I think that's been really helpful, just being prepared in a lot of ways.
I agree. I like what you said too about knowing your weaknesses and where your gaps are. And I would say in my experience, being really frank and honest about those things is also respected and helpful, to be able to say, like, we don't do that well. So I'm going to send you to somebody that does it better, or we don't do that well, but we're figuring it out. I think is really credible as well. As you were talking, I thought of one last question that I'm going to squeeze in. So when I have applied for pretty much all of the grants and funding sources that I've applied for, they've always asked for a year of audited financials in the annual report. What does that look like in a first year for you? How do you get around that?
Right now, we haven't had to do that,
Okay.
right? So
Okay.
we've avoided it by and large just the opportunities that we've applied for. There have been, I would say, one, I guess I probably shouldn't say their name, one organization at least, they were like, provide this documentation, but it was not, how you're looking at an application has a bit of an asterisk that says required. It was not required. And where there is an opportunity where you're like putting previous budget and current budget or actuals, we just don't have that column. And so we have the opportunity to engage in discussion still by providing them, like, yes, they know how to do, by providing that document and them seeing that we know how to put together a budget. We're not that new to this. And we are also tracking our spending in the dollars that are coming in by donation. And so we still get to show some of our strengths by providing documentation. That is actually one of the reasons why we won't apply for a business loan, because we know that that documentation is needed and we can't provide it. And so we're kind of buying our time, right? Even as the days go, we're getting close to a year, another opportunity to say, all right, yeah, we've been here for a little while. And now if we really needed to, we can apply for that loan, because now we can show that we have been around for X amount of years as required or expected to apply for a particular set of dollars.
Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate that. So I think that's good for our conversation. Thank you for joining me. And for the students, there's going to be a link to Merrill Safe Haven on this discussion board post. Definitely check it out. Check out the blog. Tisha does a great job, kind of really frankly sharing her experiences and where they're at. But also, if it's an organization that resonates with you, reach out, see how you can help, see what you can do to support them, because it's always appreciated.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.